Welcome back, guys. I'm Deepcut, your YouTube, and this is another episode of Hidden Meanings, the show where we discuss the themes, the metaphors, and of course, the hidden meanings behind certain episodes in the show Steven Universe. If you haven't seen the episodes before this, I highly recommend checking them out, and we will make sure that the playlist is linked down below and at the end of this video. Today we are going to be discussing a very divisive episode in the series known as Maximum Capacity. It is mostly known for its dark portrayal of Amethyst, which turned a lot of fans away from her character. However, it's also known for its very mature and sometimes confusing story. Steven Universe is a show about a kid who's starting to get glimpses into the adult world, and this episode focuses on that idea specifically. As such, we don't get the full story of Greg, Amethyst, and Rose's history that led up to this episode, and a lot of it is up for us to interpret. As such, what you're about to see is mostly my own opinion and interpretation. If yours is different, it's just as valid, if not more so please take everything I say with a grain of salt. However, with all that in mind, let's dive into it. To summarize this episode as simply as possible, it is about Greg trying to clean out his garage. He has not had a chance to clean it since before Rose passed away, and as such, all the junk that's accumulated over the years is really symbolic of his relationship with Rose, all the things that have built up and all the things he can't let go of. Steven decides to recruit Amethyst to help. To let us know that this is going to be an adult-themed episode, they have Amethyst say one seemingly innocuous but very clearly dirty line.
I've seen your junk before.
Wow. And if that wasn't enough to really hammer the point home, they have Steven rummaging through a box of books where he finds an adult-themed novel about a man who falls in love with a giant space alien woman. Sound familiar? All of these are to highlight that Steven is too young to understand exactly what is going on here, and much of the audience, seeing as the show was made for kids to watch, aren't going to get it either. But those of us who are older obviously will find these darker and more serious, mature implications. Despite Amethyst being there to help, she seems pretty determined to not let anything get thrown away, and this is a great insight to her character. While Greg is struggling with this as well, he has made a point to start letting go of some of this stuff. Amethyst, on the other hand, is not. They quickly get distracted when they find an old sitcom called Little Butler that Greg and Amethyst used to be relatively obsessed with back in the day. They decide to watch it, and Steven, being grounded from television, leaves them be, deciding to check in on them again the next day. Steven decides to go watch the fireworks with Pearl and Garnet, but is sad when Greg and Amethyst do not show up. Pearl seems worried, as Amethyst and Greg seem to have a pretty toxic relationship in the past, with them binge-watching some sitcom, as she put it. Steven realizes that this is Little Butler and immediately goes to check in on Greg and Amethyst. Steven walks in on Greg and Amethyst already in some sort of conversation about the fireworks. Greg is very disappointed that he let this sitcom get in the way of taking care of his son, which indicates that this might have happened before. Sometime after Rose passed away and Steven was born, Greg got really stuck on the show along with Amethyst, and it prevented him from being a good parent to Steven. In an attempt to satiate Greg, Amethyst transforms into Steven, and Greg notes that she knows that this makes him uncomfortable. We now know that Amethyst has taken the form of someone else like this before, and it made Greg very uncomfortable. But did it make him uncomfortable from the very beginning, or did something happen along the way that pushed it into that uncanny valley? This upsets Amethyst, and then...
I can't stay here and humor you. I have to be there for my son.
Well, what about me, huh? I had someone who was always there for me until she started hanging out with you!
Don't do this, Amethyst. Seriously.
I bet you'd stay for her.
You wouldn't.
What? Do this? Hey, Greg. Turn around.
Greg has opened up all of his baggage from Rose, both literal and figurative. And Amethyst is a part of that baggage. When someone passes away, we are rarely ever left with just the memories of them. There are burdens, both physical and emotional, that are hard to let go of, even if we wanted to. It isn't a stretch to say that Greg was using Amethyst, who would take the form of Rose, for sexual and romantic comfort. He was a lonely man in a town where he didn't know very many people. without the woman he loved, and with the responsibility of raising a child on his own. And here he had someone willing to just be with him, and to remind him of the woman he lost. But at some point, it was too much. Greg saw what he was becoming, the life he was falling into, and he knew that he had to pull himself out of it. He had to be there for Steven, for his son, to be a good father and a role model, one who was strong enough to bear the burden of what he had lost. And now, over 10 years later, Amethyst is being reminded of how good it felt for them to be together, and how bad it felt when Steven took him away from her. Steven cannot entirely understand what is happening. He is too young, too naive, and miles away from having all the pieces to the story. But what he says rings true.
I get it. It's hard to deal with stuff from the past. You want to put it off because there's tons of it, and it's really heavy, and it means a lot to you, so it's hard to let anything go. But you gotta, because this thing is full!
The next day, Greg returns with Steven to finish cleaning out all the things that have accumulated over the years. Everything he had from his time with Rose, and everything he's collected since, but finds that the entire garage has already been cleaned out by the crystal gems. Amethyst gives Greg one box of remaining items in an attempt at an apology, a single box labeled Keep. Inside, we find the only thing that the show wants us to believe we should keep after the loss of a loved one. Nothing but the memories.